Okay.
Calling meeting to order. Thank you.
Oh, you know what's so funny is it was it was quite cold. There doesn't seem to be a happy medium, does there?
No.
Yes, I will see what we can do.
Thank you.
Okay, let me know when I start.
He can see Janet and I.
No,
Okay.
okay, we're going to continue. Everyone's settled and we're ready to go with our afternoon panels. Our first panel, I want to welcome our first panel on arts and culture. And our first speaker is David Stocks, Juan de Fuca Performing Arts Center Society. So David, over to you. I think you're on mute, David.
Okay, one crisis at a time. My name is David Stocks. I'm representing the Juan de Fuca Performing Arts Center Society. We're incorporated in British Columbia and we have charitable status. We've been formed for one objective only, which was to create a performing arts venue on the West Shore of Greater Victoria. The problem we're trying to solve is a well-documented lack of performance spaces that meet 4 particular criteria. First of all, it has to be appropriate. The performance venue has to include the facilities that community groups, performing groups need. It has to be accessible to both audiences and performers of different capabilities. It has to be affordable. We don't need a gold-plated, diamond-studded performance venue. We need one that can be rented out to community groups at reasonable rents. It has to be available. Priority has to be given to performances, not for other purposes. The solution that we're proposing is a venue with spaces for performances, rehearsals, for teaching, for producing graphic arts, and galleries in which graphic arts can be displayed and sold. We're also proposing as a fundamental, a community gathering place. A place in which members of the community can gather, meet their neighbors, have a conversation, and have a coffee and build a sense of community. We're building community infrastructure. Now, we need sources of revenue. As you know, community theaters tend to lose money, and in terms of operating, we intend to have sources of rental revenue because we intend to build spaces that can be rented to, for example, a business that would provide dancing slippers or dancing uniforms, a business that would sell and repair musical instruments. So businesses that are complementary to the performing arts. We also plan to have a good restaurant, a cafe, and a gift shop. Now, to build this, we need capital inputs. We propose that the province provide 1/4 of the estimated cost of $60 million. That would be a $15 million capital input from the province. We will, of course, approach other levels of government and private sector sources, various foundations and whatnot that wish to support the arts. We wish to build a sustainable building from the point of view of the design and the materials that are used, but it also has to be sustainable financially. One of the driving forces behind us is that we believe, and it's been well documented, that the arts contribute to the health of the citizenry. There's a very interesting book called Palaces for the People, written by Eric Kleinenberg, which demonstrates that the existence of a social infrastructure enterprise, such as we're planning to build, can actually contribute to saving lives during an emergency like a heat wave. And I commend that book to your attention. Mental health, of course, is always supported by the arts. The arts can be used as mental health therapy, both for people who are struggling with mental health issues and for people who are potentially at risk. The COVID experience, of course, now that we're coming out of COVID, everybody is clamoring for live performances. So we're certainly aligned with that desire. We're also aligned with government priorities, and I'll mention 3 in particular. The mandate letter to the Honourable Melanie Mark contains these beautiful words: support the creation of dedicated arts and culture spaces. You can imagine how much we enjoyed reading that. First Nations involved. First Nations have been involved in the past and will be involved in the future in the planning of the facility, the operating of it, and in, of course, the performing. And another government priority that we support is getting BC back to work. We represent a construction project in the order of $60 million and at least $2 million of ongoing permanent payroll to operate the facility and those few supporting businesses that I defined. We propose that we're part of a solution to enhance the health of this populace and to support various government priorities. We implore you to support arts facilities, including ours. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And next we'll hear from Anthony Kendall, Vancouver Art Gallery.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to start by acknowledging and thanking the committee for this opportunity to present. My name is Anthony Kendall. I'm the CEO and director of Vancouver Art Gallery, and I'm speaking to you from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we're grateful to live and work on their traditional homelands. I also want to start just by thanking the government of BC for its funding of the arts and tourism sectors, including a $1 million investment in Vancouver Art Gallery as part of the province's COVID recovery response to the tourism sector, and its ongoing commitment to the Vancouver Art Gallery project, otherwise known as the Chan Centre for the Visual Arts. COVID-19 has had a tremendous impact on the gallery and across the sector in arts, culture, and tourism. In our case, the gallery has lost 80% of our visitors, and of which 55% are tourists. And that means a 75% reduction in our earned revenue, which led us to lay off over 50 full-time equivalent staff. And we're still working reduced hours at the gallery and working closely with our union to move forward to return to full-time hours. Nevertheless, our doors have been open since July and the initial 3-month lockdown of the pandemic, providing relief and inspiration to thousands of BC residents during this time. We sincerely believe that art gives people the tools to think creatively and to solve problems. Art galleries and museums are here to assist people in thinking differently, helping us solve the challenges we face in society and to create healthier, more just and equitable communities. And we are grateful for the support from the province, given the leadership of Dr. Bonnie Henry and the management of the pandemic in BC. I'm going to talk briefly about the project of the Chan Centre for the Visual Arts, the new home for the Vancouver Art Gallery. And we are urging the committee to ensure that this building project is included in British Columbia's fiscal plan for 2022. The Chan Centre for the Visual Arts is a $340 million, 300,000 square foot multi-purpose community space serving stakeholders and communities across the province. It will include galleries, education spaces, a family learning center, a center for early childhood education, an Indigenous community house, a center for art and communication that will broadcast our programs across BC and around the world, as well as artist live-work studios and the Institute of Asian Art, as well as visible art storage that will showcase the province's cultural heritage through our collection of over 12,000 works of art. This project will secure over 3,000 new jobs in the construction industry to build the Chan Centre for the Visual Arts and to make a significant impact towards BC's COVID-19 recovery plan. It will also create 1,000 permanent jobs in the tourism industry through building the new Vancouver Art Gallery, which was the #1 tourist destination in BC in 2020. The tourism industry has, as you know, has been decimated by COVID-19, and this would make a significant contribution to rebuilding the sector. Support for this project also means support for employment and recovery of the arts and cultural workers. There are 28,700 artists in the province of BC, which represents 18% of all Canadian artists, of which 56% are self-employed. Creation of the Chance Centre for the Visual Arts will double the gallery scope, creating more opportunities for exhibitions, commissions, projects, and employment of cultural workers. The project also mitigates the effects of climate change in supporting the creation of the first passive house standard art museum in North America and support Clean BC's goal of building better, cleaner buildings and reducing climate change. The project also supports Indigenous culture, reconciliation, and redress, and we have a group of Coast Salish artists collaborating with the architects on the exterior design of the new building. The project also supports the Childcare BC plan with the creation of up to 37 spaces for early childhood education and preschool. The project also supports cultural diversity, equity, and inclusion, creating social cohesion and serving over 1 million visitors a year, reflecting BC's diverse culture. And finally, it will provide BC residents with opportunities to engage in creative learning and problem solving through innovative art activities, which help create a more resilient society and a healthier society. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Anthony. And our next speaker, before we open it up for questions from the committee, is Doug Jarvis, Pro Art Alliance of Greater Victoria.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today and to speak on behalf and in support of the arts and culture sector in the province. My name is Doug Jarvis, and I'm the administrator for the Pro Art Alliance of Greater Victoria. I want to acknowledge that Pro Art and its member organizations work on Lekwungen people's territory. We make our living here, alongside the Somnis, Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples, as artists, programmers, technicians, administrators, educators, among many other roles that work together to make art happen in our communities, through building relationships with the land and the people of the land. This is the context in which we all gather here to present perspectives on the value of the resources that this province provides in the service to the health and welfare of all of its citizens. ProArt is a member-driven organization that represents 18 professional arts organizations that create and manage art and culture services within the Greater Victoria region. We advocate for public sector support in the Capital Regional District, which is an active, dynamic, and multifaceted region within the province's very strong arts and culture sector. On behalf of the ProArt membership and the regional arts community, I want to thank you. Thank you for the work that you have done so far in your mandate to invest in and support the arts and culture sector. We appreciate the openness of this government and your willingness to consult with the sector as we continue to navigate the ongoing social and economic circumstances caused by the global pandemic. Let's keep working together to maintain and strengthen the social and economic health and wellness of the citizens of BC during this time and into the future. As we are all now aware, the pandemic context has made it quite visible that arts and culture are an important part of the lives of British Columbians. As the citizens of the province navigated the challenges of quarantine shutdowns, social distancing, and the disruption of our weekly routines, arts and culture activities, exercises, and programs became a lifeline. With the increase in pandemic-related anxiety, uncertainty, and the broader social awareness and social justice campaigns that have mobilized over the last couple of years, personal and community health and wellness has become a critical issue. We are no longer in the time where it is enough to craft a strategic support statement to demonstrate solidarity with the communities in which we work, live, and advocate. We are now in a time of action. This past year has highlighted the following: that health and wellness is a critical aspect of the daily lives of British Columbians, that the arts and culture sector is resilient, and that we need to acknowledge the continued value and benefits of the arts and culture sector, and that we need to acknowledge and celebrate the creativity and innovation of our member organizations, and as they advocate the very challenging and truth-telling aspects of this period of time. And over this term, art service organizations such as ProArt have been meeting on a regular basis to consolidate our member organizations' perspectives, share information, and create best practices to better align as a sector to work with the province. We have benefited from the open and accessible communications with members of the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture and Sport, the BC Arts Council, and the Public Health Office. We are working together with other sectors and wanting to work across the sectors with tourism, with health, to strengthen and expand the ways that the arts and culture sector is active in its own right, but also as a collaborative colleague. For example, there's discussions of reopening campaigns, working with tourism and health to demonstrate and exercise the wellness, health and wellness that the arts and culture provide. We're also looking in support of the diversity that BC has in its cultural sector, which is supported by the ongoing investment in arts and culture through the BC Arts Council. We have a few recommendations at this time. Number one, communicate to the public the important role that the arts and culture have played in maintaining people's health and wellness during the pandemic and beyond. 2, respond to the ongoing need for resilience funding. 3, commit to stable operating funds for arts and culture organizations. 4, continue to prioritize funding for reconciliation and repatriation. And 5, work with the arts and culture sector and heritage sector to promote the vital role that cultural organizations play in strengthening local economies. As my colleagues are demonstrating with their building projects and the economic impact of employment, we all are asking for more support and stabilization during this uncertain time. With respect, thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Now I'll open up for questions from the committee. Pam.
Thank you. First question is for the Wanda Fuqua Performing Arts Association. Is your venue that you're planning in the city of Victoria? I didn't catch it, I'm sorry.
The venue that we're planning, it will be in the West Shore, somewhere west of Portage Inlet and the Esquimalt Harbor, because that is the area in which people tend to live, and that we don't want them to have to drive downtown and drive back after dinner to see a performance, because that would produce all kinds of bad gases and whatnot.
Okay, and so are you working with the municipality, I guess, of Esquimalt? Is it municipality or city?
Thank you for the question.
No.
The municipality we're primarily working with is the city of Colwood. There's a piece of land. It has been announced, actually, the piece of land we're negotiating for. Colwood a few years ago contributed, I think, $95,000 to a study by a theater consultant, and he interviewed all kinds of potential users, and we have a very solid basis for our planning. But we're working with City Colwood primarily, although all West Shore municipalities have been giving us money every year and letters of support.
Okay. There's also a model in Chilliwack that was recently constructed, say in the last 5 or 6 years, that everybody sort of came together, and it sounds very much like your vision, as opposed, with the gallery and working spaces and rehearsal spaces and all that. So if you might want to check that out. Thank you
very much.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. And the Chan Center for Visual Arts sounds absolutely fabulous. What is your timeline for that?
We would break ground next summer, and it would be a 3-year construction period. We've submitted our application for a development permit with the City of Vancouver, and it's going through the city administration right now.
And is it the land, it's downtown Vancouver?
Yes, it's downtown Vancouver between Georgia, Cambie, and Edie.
Yeah, just want to double check because I thought that's where you were going, but it sounded like this was a bigger plan, and I was wondering if there was some conversation about changing locations. But this is still the same location, yet you will house all these other entities. It sounds absolutely fabulous. So thank you for that. Okay, I think that's it. And I just want to thank the Pro Alliance of Greater Victoria, because we absolutely know how much we missed arts and culture through the pandemic. I myself just, it was terrible. It was like cutting off my left arm, to be honest. And, we were busier than ever, and I couldn't go to things and feel things that I needed to feel. And so it was really hit home for me. There was somebody that was waving their hand, I think. Thank you.
Mike.
Thank you, Chair. This is to you, Anthony. Did I hear you say that this was going to be the first passive house and museum in North America?
Yes, that's what we understand. Yeah.
I don't know what else to say other than wow. I mean, it's 300,000 square feet. If you guys can accomplish it, I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to operate that way. I mean, the grin on your face is almost like the grin on my face when I think about a passive house. So thank you very much for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ben.
Thanks very much. David, I just looking at your notes about your performing center, there's a similar facility that was constructed in Kelowna a few years ago called it's Rotary Center for the Arts. But anyways, similar seating capacity, has similar rental spaces, and I think it would be, really important because having been on the committee doing fundraising, et cetera, for it, I know that it's important in these things that they get utilization and proof of concept, et cetera. And I, to be honest, I will get you some contacts for that individual because it's surrounded by the art gallery and a bunch of hotels. It's in the cultural district, as it's called in Kelowna. But I think that because of that, it is more successful and a kind of a standalone on its own out there. I did have a similar question. So to clarify, Anthony, so the location is on the existing Vancouver Art Gallery location. Is it like on, you said Georgia, am I got that right? It's over top of the existing art gallery?
No, it's about a 10-minute walk to the east, still on Georgia. It's next to the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. It's called Larwell Park, and it's across from the Sandman Hotel, very close to BC Place. Okay. And so we would create a real cultural district in association with the Queen Elizabeth Theatre and the Vancouver Public Library being neighbors.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, didn't know how well that would go over knowing how Vancouver's redevelopment goes sometimes. So, all right.
Yeah, it's currently a vacant land right now.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Lauren.
Thank you, Chair. The question is also for you again, Anthony. We've heard from other groups today the dramatic loss of economy right throughout British Columbia for attractions like yours. I wonder if you could give us a sense of what that economy looks like in your situation. So I think you said that you were off 75% in revenue. I wondered if I could get a clear picture of what that looks like. And also, I guess, did I hear you say that you received $1 million? If that is correct, I wanted to know what that money was used for, if it was used for operational or if it was used to improve the facility.
Okay, just on the last one, it's operational. It was $1 million from the province for COVID recovery as a response to for the tourism sector. The overall impact has been dramatic. In 2019, we were a $20 million organization. Our current operating budget is just under $12 million. So it's really cut the gallery almost in half. We've done a lot to pivot, moving programs online to keep what staff employed that we can. And of course, we're unionized with CUPE and we're working very closely with them. But it did result in the loss of over 50 full-time equivalents. We currently have full-time staff of about 137 employees. Pre-pandemic, it was over 200 employees.
Devastating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben?
Thanks. A question just to Doug, because you didn't ask for money specifically. And no, I understand that, investing in the arts has been a big part of my background. And what I wanted to understand is the Capital Regional District, that cluster, if you want to call it, with the Royal BC Museum, does that have an impact in the groups, the Pro Art Alliance? Are they influential in terms of helping keep everybody afloat?
Well, the Pro Art Alliance, yes, all of our, or many of our member organizations operate, the majority of their programming through the McPherson and the Royal Theatres. So the facilities, and there's a lot of active discussion right now around the facilities and the CRD's service to provide a service to regional facilities. So yes, we are in very kind of close consultation with the CRD Arts Development Service and the CRD around the operation of facilities and funding in the region. So I am interested to hear about the West Shore project, and we're talking at a provincial level here, but we do know that all levels, from local, regional, provincial, and federal, it's how we all work together and kind of intersect on these different levels. That is where we can help develop a healthy, resilient, and economically strong province, and more specifically region. So I would say that the Pro Art member organizations are definitely supportive of the activities of the CRD, and we all want to have better managed or well managed and accessible facilities with sustainable futures in the region, so that we can have thriving arts and culture programming and thriving jobs. There's a lot of people looking for jobs, and a lot of people, as my colleagues are demonstrating, needing jobs. So yes, investment from the government in any capacity. I haven't mentioned the support of the BC Arts Council operating funding, because we've been saying that for the last 10 years, it seems like, and there has been some definite progress in that area. But I think supporting the BC Arts Council operating and their initiatives is a very active and accessible way to support the regional arts for us, for example, in a sustainable way.
Thanks.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. So I would like to wrap up this panel by thanking you so much for taking the time to inspire us, actually. I think it's so important that you have chosen to articulate your requests by putting art at the center of the life of the community and of the economy, and that I guess I want to go back. I'm paraphrasing. I think, Anthony, I think it was you who said that art gives us the tools to think creatively. And as politicians in this very challenging time, we must be thinking creatively. And this committee is charged with coming up with new ideas to improve, to hear new ideas from you, package up new ideas from you, and from the public, and we have to be brave enough to look at a blank canvas and have the confidence to fill it up with something beautiful for the future. So thank you for being part of that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
See you.
Thank you very much. Look forward to meeting you, Doug. We've got work to do.
Likewise.
See y'all later.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, we'll take a short recess. Committee back to order, and continuing with the theme of arts and culture, we will hear from Scott Bellis, BC Performing Arts and Live Events Labour Coalition.
Great, thank you very much. Good afternoon, members of the Finance Committee. My name is Scott Bellis. I'm an actor and director and have worked primarily in live performing arts here in BC since 1987. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the Performing Arts and Live Events Labour Coalition of BC. Our group is composed of unions and professional associations whose members, like myself, work in music, theatre, dance, and other live performance art forms. In our sector, working conditions vary widely from customary norms. So my goal today is to bring your attention to some longstanding inequities that are within our sector and recommend some ideas that could allow arts workers, all 28,000 of us in BC, to add greater value to the social health of British Columbians province-wide, value that can't always be measured by the same metrics as some other sectors. Point one, arts and cultural workers knit together many short-term engagements into a low to modest income arts career. The original gig economy. We may have a 2-month run for a play, or a week or two at an outdoor festival, or a 2-day call to load in a rock concert. Many arts workers are classified as independent contractors, do not have access to social safety nets like employment insurance. Very few maintain standard employment relationships. Their work is casual or contract-based with little stability or predictable future employment. This long established precarity was exposed and exacerbated when the COVID-19 pandemic ground everything to a complete halt. Now, there will be fewer arts workers post-pandemic. My BC membership list is down 18% as of June. Those who make it through will have done so almost solely because of support programs like the BC Emergency Workers Benefit and the BC Rent Subsidy. Thank you very much for those. The federal CERB and CRB also obviously helped a lot. And with the federal government unwilling to implement a Canadian UBI at present, a BC-based arts worker direct benefit payment, similar to the post-COVID pilot program instituted in the Republic of Ireland, could help ensure that they are able to stay within the sector. A direct payment program with very specific eligibility requirements could make the difference for many artists between making a rent and losing their home and being able to stay in our sector. Point two, paid sick leave. The movement from the provincial government towards paid sick leave is very, very welcome first step. Access for live arts workers remains somewhat in question. The old unhealthy adage, the show must go on, is still annoyingly present in our community, and it pressures arts workers to work while sick, endangering their own health and that of their colleagues. This is a very big challenge for our sector. Pressure is very high. Performers and musicians cannot simply call in without potentially causing the cancellation of an entire performance and harm to their employer relationships. Fear of reprisal is unfortunately still very widespread in our sector. So we recommend a producer's insurance pool supported by the government with a scaled health tax on producers that would defray the cost of paid sick leave and the additional costs of understudies and replacements that noticeably expand production budgets. The pool would reduce uncertainty for artists and the administrative challenges for smaller arts employers. Point three, arts and culture workers funding. We request increased funding for the arts sector that is directly tied to the hiring of freelance artists, not internships and not for the maintenance of operations. Freelance artists are not benefiting from the funding structures currently in place, and that has been demonstrated thoroughly through the pandemic. When all the theaters shut down, the first people kicked out were the actors and technicians. We asked that the ministry allocate funds earmarked directly to increase employment of freelance artists and technicians. We have to alleviate precarity of employment in our sector, get our members back to work. As an example of the status quo, right now in August, the Arts Club Theatre, Western Canada's largest theatre company, produced 2 shows. Each of them had 1 actor on stage. Not helpful. Funding increases in the past have not led to sustainable employment. Funding needs to be built differently to ensure that increases are tied to employment, not institutional operational costs. Point 4, childcare. The movement towards $10 a day childcare is incredibly promising. We request that any publicly funded programs include options for parents working outside the typical 9-to-5 structure, We are evening and weekend workers, which makes sense when you consider the role arts and culture plays within the social fabric of BC. Okay, for more details on any of those ideas, please refer to the white paper, which will be forthcoming to your committee. In conclusion, I just want to share one thing. In 2019, my association surveyed its members working in theater, opera, and dance to ascertain their impressions of their own mental health. 74% of respondents reported that a mental health issue had impacted their career, 23% significantly or severely at least once. And over the previous 6 months, 56% had experienced depression and 74% had experienced general anxiety. I suggest to you that financial precarity is a root cause. Our members deal with a lot. We ask for your kind consideration in the upcoming budget. Arts workers in BC are skilled and talented and deeply proud of what they do for the province. They do it out of love and they make BC a better place for it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Scott. And now I'll open it up to questions, comments, observations from the committee.
I don't really have any questions, just a comment. You really actually captured the very essence of what we experienced through COVID and your industry. So thank you for being so succinct and explaining everything so well.
I rehearsed it a lot.
There's a little bit of, you're welcome, but there was a little bit of noise just as you were delivering. I just wanted to let you know that there was some feedback. So just wanted to let you know.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chair. And Scott, there was a comment that you made that kind of alarmed me somewhat, and I would hope in this day and age that it didn't exist, but fear of reprisal. Is it a fear, or is it a genuine concern?
Well, I think it's always existed because a certain amount of working relationship, a certain part of working relationships in performing arts is built on social capital and subjective opinions about a person's work. It's so when, as an artist, if you're a freelance artist and you have no guarantee of future income with your current employer beyond next week, you want to make sure that you maintain a good relationship with that employer so that they will hire you back at some point in the future. So if you call into question certain things about working conditions, or you say, I need something from you because I'm sick, there's a fear that you just won't be asked to come back. That's a very real thing that many of our members deal with. So I think anything that would support a worker's ability to claim paid sick leave without fear that they're causing a major problem for their employer would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, I'd like to hear more about actors as part of the gig economy. You'd mentioned that, and about just go into some more detail about what a better alternative would be.
I'm a freelance artist. I don't work for a theater company full time. I work anywhere I can get a job. So that might be working on a play. Oh, I'm getting an unstable internet message here. Please bear with me. It might be working on a play for a few weeks. It might be working a few days on a film set. It might be helping to workshop a new script. So it's very piecemeal. I've never had a contract that lasted more than 4 months. And I've been doing this for 35 years. So we're constantly hopping from one place to another. Is there anything else I can illuminate for you in that regard?
So currently actors are defined as independent contractors, so you're not covered by employment standards?
That's correct. That determination was made for us by Revenue Canada in 1976 when we formed our professional association.
Okay. But you're a member of a union? No?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I did speak. I guess we're getting a little connection problem here. The answer is yes, we are self-employed.
Okay. But are you a member of a union?
Yes, I'm a member of a professional association,
Okay.
which represents about 6,000 artists across Canada.
Okay. So you talked about the changes that the Republic of Ireland made. I, for one, will like to look into that. Are there anything else you would recommend, any other models around the world that are already in place that would address your situation?
I'm really sorry you're breaking up.
Oh.
I think it's my connection.
We can follow
other
up.
Yeah, that would be great.
We can
Other
follow up.
examples of UBI, was that your question?
Other, like you talked about the Republic of Ireland.
Yes.
Yes.
So they had a post-COVID pilot program that they're instituting, which is going to pay arts workers a minimum weekly rate to help them get back up on their feet after what has now been a year and a half of almost no income, relying completely on whatever the governments have been able to provide for them. So,
Right.
yeah.
I know that there's I won't belabor it, but I'm not sure that you're hearing me because of the internet connection. If there are models elsewhere in the world about actors not being treated as independent contractors and actually being eligible for benefits that other workers are eligible
Yes.
for, I'd be interested to hear more about that.
Our status in Canada as self-employed contractors is somewhat unusual. I also sit on as a member of the International Federation of Actors. So, so yeah, in most other countries, the United States, for example, actors are treated as employees and have the same access to those kinds of support programs. Some countries, like Canada, it's a little different.
Okay.
And it's a rarity.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I don't see any other questions. You've opened up a whole new can of worms in terms of how we treat and respect people in your profession in this province, and you've given us something to look into more deeply. So
It's a great privilege to speak to your committee. I consider it one of my biggest auditions ever.
Thank you. And we'll all applaud.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll take a bow.
See you later.
All right. Take care. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, we can recess until 2:25 because our next speaker has canceled. The meeting back to order. And we are now going to be hearing from a panel on libraries. And our first presenter is Raina Hadziev with British Columbia Library Association.
Hi there. If you don't mind, I'm actually just going to turn it quickly over to Kevin as he's the chair of our group.
Is Kevin here?
No, he's not here yet.
Kevin's not here. Okay, then I will speak. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about libraries. My name's Raina Hadziev. I'm coming to you from the unceded territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, whose relationships with the land continue to this day. And I'm pleased to be presenting this morning on behalf of the BC Library Association and in partnership with the BC Libraries Co-op, the Association of BC Public Library Directors, and the BC Library Trustees Association. The BC Library Association represents libraries and library staff from across the province. We represent unionized staff, non-unionized staff, staff from large libraries, and staff from very small libraries. We represent staff from public, academic, and special libraries. And the association also represents BC libraries as institutions. These can range from our largest university libraries to our small local public libraries. We're also privileged to represent many library stakeholders in BC, including publishers, literacy organizations, and library vendors. The BC Library Association was founded over 100 years ago and has had a steady, progressive, and relevant role to play as an essential part of the infrastructure of BC's library environment. And BCLA is proud to be part of such a vital sector in our province, particularly proud of the work our members have done over the past 18 months. During the pandemic, libraries and library workers have pivoted and stepped up to support their communities in new ways. At first, when things shut down, they provided take-home technology and Wi-Fi in parking lots. They did online story times and programs, and they reached out to isolated seniors and people with disabilities to ensure they were all right and connect them. As the province has reopened, libraries have helped people get online to reconnect with family and friends in other places, apply for desperately needed financial support, and escape the day-to-day anxieties of our current situation. As the province looks to strengthen and rebuild the economy, libraries and library workers will be key, offering access to information and educational resources, teaching new skills, providing physical space, and leveling the playing field for those in need. Libraries will also be directly contributing to the economy by employing British Columbians and buying books and other materials. So the BC Libraries Association request to you is to invest in communities across BC by investing in our public libraries. There's a perception that libraries and library workers are quiet, which I can assure you is not true. But what is true is the work that they do is often done quietly. They don't have time to shout about the lives they're changing because they're too busy stepping up to try to help the next person in need. We're here to make sure you know about the lives being changed by the libraries and library workers in your communities. And I can tell you, library workers are some of the most dedicated folks you'll ever meet. They truly believe in what they do. They're passionate about making their communities more inclusive, more equitable, more connected, and more enjoyable. They've managed to work with stagnant funding for the past 10 years, but it's getting harder and harder. So I wanted to just thank you again for the opportunity to share with you what libraries are doing to support people across British Columbia and ask you to consider supporting $22 million in 2022 to increase the provincial funding for public libraries so they can do even more to meet what we know are increasing needs of all of your communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Raina. And I understand that Kevin has now joined us. So I'll now turn to Kevin Millsap.
Thank you, Chair. And hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Millsap. I'm the Executive Director of the BC Libraries Cooperative, and I am the co-chair of the BC Public Library Partners. I'm calling in to you today from the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. As Raina probably outlined in her comments, the Public Library Partners is made up of 4 organizations. We're all here today on this call, and we work together to advocate on behalf of the public library sector in British Columbia. So first off, I just want to start with a thank you to the provincial government for the one-time $3 million investment that was provided for our sector in the spring of 2020 for digital infrastructure-related projects. I'm happy to share that investment is being put to excellent use. It was welcome and needed, and it's being utilized in an array of technology projects across the province. From the partner's perspective, as we think about the public library system as a whole, in which Raina has already shared with you some details of, when we think about the different kinds of work that is needed to provide public library service across BC, we really have one ask for you today. And we're asking for a long-term commitment to increase the annual operating grant that is going from the provincial government to public libraries in BC from its current allocation of $14 million a year to $22 million a year. And as some of you will know, the current allocation of $14 million a year hasn't increased in over a decade. Without even periodic adjustments for inflation, a frozen budget is one that simply delivers less over time. Municipalities have not really been able to completely fill this gap, and we want to try to dial back this trend of the total amount of funding coming from the province to public libraries. We want to change that trajectory, if you will. So $22 million a year would be where we currently would be in terms of provincial grants to public libraries in the province had we not had a cut to the allocation a number of years ago and had that amount kept up with inflation. Some of my colleagues are going to continue to speak more to the details of what's going on within the sector. But I just want to say this, a lot of the community building and support work that libraries do every day will probably continue in a combination of a hybrid manner of online and in-person services for some time. We are trying to raise our collective capacity to do this work well and for libraries to have the support that they need to adapt to the new operating realities of the pandemic, as we're all trying to do, and to be able to provide services to their communities in ways that community members deserve. So, throughout the pandemic, libraries haven't really been able to access the different kinds of supports made available from federal and provincial government. And throughout this, public libraries have taken on a host of new responsibilities and a host of new costs just to try to maintain services in this new hybrid environment. So as we think about public libraries as a key component of what we would call the tapestry of public services and infrastructure that people are going to continue to rely on as we come out of the pandemic, we really want to be able to come out of this time in a way where we're taking better care of one another. To do that, we're going to need more investment in all aspects of the public realm, and we see the provincial government doing that in a number of targeted areas. Our ask is that public libraries be a part of that increased investment environment. So thanks again for your time, and I'll pass it back to the chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next speaker is Lynn Kirk, BC Library Trustees Association.
Hello, everybody. Thank you and good afternoon. As you already heard, I'm Lynn Kirk, and I'm working and living in 2 different areas of the province. I'm one of the fortunate ones. I'm calling in today from Treaty 8 territory, and I generally will be in Prince George, which is on the traditional and unceded territory of the Late Tenay, where the 2 rivers meet. I have a home in each area, so I'm very lucky. I am here today representing the BC Library Trustees Association. Our mandate is to represent, connect, and support the nearly 700 volunteer trustees across the province who, on behalf of their communities, govern BC public libraries, much the same as the school board trustees govern theirs, although our library trustees don't get a stipend. They volunteer out of a passion for their public library. I'm grateful to be here today with our sector partners, the BC Library Association, the Association of BC Public Library Directors, lovingly known as ABC PLD, and the BC Libraries Cooperative. You already heard from Kevin. We work together to represent the shared interests of our members and are known as BC Library Public Library Partners. The provincial government and Minister Osborne are supporters of BC Public Libraries and have voiced their appreciation for what BC Public Libraries do to further the goals of the provincial government. Across BC, public libraries are the only public spaces that provide equitable access for all British Columbians, regardless. All British Columbians can access the tools, resources, and expert staff for learning, exploring, creating, and connecting with others. All British Columbians have access to information for furthering individual, family, community goals such as education, housing, jobs, reconciliation, social inclusion, and anti-racism. Public libraries are there for the big discussions and learning that bring us all together and foster social well-being for everyone. The role of public libraries is broadly recognized and appreciated. As such, the provincial government engages with us and builds shared goals and outcomes with us. Libraries are part of what makes BC successful. But since 2010, all public libraries across British Columbia have been stuck sharing the $14 million annually from the provincial government. Being from Tumbler Ridge, we get a very small portion of that. That funding is spread very thinly across the province through a variety of annual operating grants, support services, and one-time grants. When inflation and increased service demands are factored in, our sector is being left far behind by the provincial government. Thus, our ask for $20 million in 2020 was strongly supported by elected officials and community members in the prior year's budget consultations. 2 years later, we're here stuck at 2010 pricing, and now we're asking for $22 million in 2022. Our members of BCLTA who volunteer to govern in accordance with the BC Library Act are committed to their communities, to public libraries, and to their legally binding fiduciary responsibilities. As they fulfill their governance duties, they are struggling to make sense as to why the provincial government has not yet resolved this funding issue, given the value that BC public libraries deliver to the provincial government and across the province. As such, we are compelled on their behalf to call on the provincial government to address the stagnant funding of the past decade, to close that gap on the funding that has been lost through lack of increases, to make a commitment to supporting ongoing, reliable funding that is directed to the operations of public libraries, and, at the very least, includes annual increases to account for inflation and ongoing costs of delivering public library services throughout the province. Investing in BC public libraries is investing in BC communities. On behalf of the BC Library Trustees Association board and members, I thank you for your time and the energy that you are each putting into these public consultations, and for listening to the concerns and needs of the nearly 700 volunteer trustees that govern BC's public libraries. Thank you very much. I'll turn back over to the chair.
Thank you, Jerry Lynn. And our final speaker before we open it up for questions and discussion is Elizabeth Tracy with the Association of BC Public Library Directors.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Elizabeth Tracy, and I have the privilege of addressing you today from Whistler, where I am grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and play on the unceded shared territories of the Squamish and Lillooet Nations. I am here today representing the Association of BC Public Library Directors, a membership organization representing, supporting, and advocating for BC Public Library Directors. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today in collaboration with the BC Trustees Association, the BC Library Association, and the BC Libraries Co-op. So I'll give you some context. In a world where social connection has become increasingly difficult, libraries are playing a key role as community hubs that build a sense of belonging. As we gradually see our way out of the pandemic, we now know how much of true belonging comes from building social connection in a real physical environment. We often have people tell us that the library is one of the first places in their community that make them feel like a local. Libraries are one of those places where people don't have to buy anything to be there. Our programs and materials are curated by professional people who are committed to being open and inclusive. And when we say belonging at the library, we mean it. We welcome all sizes, colors, abilities, ages, cultures, orientations, genders, religions, and beliefs. And we strive to create a place for everyone. The library plays a key role in a healthy community, and the library staff have the amazing combined power of trust and generosity that can elevate people's sense of belonging. We get the chance to welcome everyone, and we make them feel at home while we connect them with information, technology, and other folks in our community. In times of abundance and scarcity, libraries provide the solace of non-soliciting environments of escape. We offer a safe and confidential place to explore curiosities, dissolve concerns. We help immigrants navigate the complexities of settlement within new society. We make referrals and create connections for people struggling to emerge from poverty, abuse, addiction. We create dedicated spaces for children and families to learn and connect. And we provide space for civic engagement and discourse on the issues that challenge our societies. So here's my ask. You've heard from us before, and we greatly appreciate the opportunity to come to you and ask for support on behalf of the individuals and communities we serve. As we are all well aware, the events of the last 2 years have had dire implications on the health and well-being of BC's citizens. And we see firsthand the ways in which libraries have served to meet the priorities of government. We ask you to think about the value that is derived from the provincial government's contribution of $14 million to BC's public libraries, and how, while the cost of doing business has increased since 2010, libraries have continued to manage doing more with less each year, and no additional support from the province. In the most difficult of circumstances, libraries across the province have worked within the constraints of the pandemic to provide communities with some sense of normal life. We have accomplished that under the pressure of increasing costs without the additional support of the pandemic emergency assistance provided to many of our counterparts. With this in mind, we ask for your commitment of $22 million in 2022, as well as ongoing incremental increases so that we can improve our ability to meet the needs of individuals, families, and communities across the province when the need is greater than ever. Our members, along with their staff, are on the front lines of community issues like social justice, climate change, economic uncertainty, wildfire, residential school trauma, pandemic-related mental health issues, and substance abuse. And they're doing everything they can to develop a skilled workforce to navigate these complex issues, along with managing to provide core library services. It is increasingly difficult to understand why these services have not warranted a minimal inflationary increase since 2010. Which is why I'm here today to ask for your support. So on behalf of the Association of BC Public Library Directors and the BC Partners, I thank you for this opportunity to share what libraries are doing in your communities, and thank you so much for your consideration of support for an inflationary increase in 2022. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So now, having heard from all four panelists, I will now, I see lots of questions. Okay, so Megan.
Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel for your presentation. It was wonderful to hear about all of the initiatives that you are undertaking and the hard work that you've done during the pandemic to support communities. You talked about outreach with a wide group, including seniors. And in the outreach that you did, has that translated as things are opening up to sort of new users to your library services? What did that look like, and who was it that you found were really coming to you during the pandemic, during the height of the lockdown for your programming? And has anything changed as you're coming out of it?
I can speak to this for just a moment. Well, this is sort of a recent example, but I would say as people have had to adapt to different restrictions throughout the pandemic, the advent of vaccination started to bring people to us for scheduling of their vaccinations and information regarding that. And now at this juncture, I would say I was laughing the other day because I was seeing my staff practicing downloading the app for the BC services card. And of course, doing this in preparation for the Vax passport or, anyways. So they were going through this and rehearsing with some of the patrons in the library, knowing that, we are going to be a conduit for helping people connect. And, nowhere this is more true as things roll out in the technological sense than with our senior community.
Oh, that is very interesting. And further, is there anybody else that would like to weigh in too on sort of the changing role through the pandemic?
I would say one of the examples, and then I can tell Jerry Lynn has something too, from some of the libraries that actually did the reaching out. So I heard of examples of libraries who are doing things like looking at one of the services that is pretty standard in libraries is that if people are too frail or not healthy enough to get out, that they will actually deliver material to them. And for many of those folks, that is a lifeline in their regular life that's already quite limited. So many of them really depend on that service. So when libraries couldn't provide that, it's often done with volunteers, and obviously going into either seniors' homes or individual homes at one point was really not safe. They were finding other ways to connect with these folks. So they weren't so much new users as they were people who already depend on the library to be their connection to the community, and they were more needy than ever before when they couldn't have family members come. They couldn't, do their weekly trip to the grocery store, those other little things that keep them healthy and connected in their community and engaged. And we know for seniors, a lot of that stimulation is so important. So often it was being a friendly voice on the other end of the phone, which is not normally a particular role that libraries focus on. But during the pandemic, that human connection and those societal links were so essential, and libraries already had that trust, that relationship, and that knowledge of community to provide that where it was needed.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to step in, and being the mother of 5 children and the grandmother of 16 beautiful grandchildren, one of the things that I've really appreciated is the fact that the libraries have been creating little packages for the kids and then bringing them out every week, because they haven't been able to come into the library. So this has been a huge additional cost to our libraries, where they will put together crafts and books and things for the kids, delivered them to their homes, and then the kids had access to that. So it's kind of like, still being able to go to the library without going to the library. And then they would host a Zoom meeting or a Facebook Live presentation telling them, this is how you do this craft, and this is the story that we're focusing on today. So it's really amazing, as far as I'm concerned, to see the libraries going above and beyond like that. And I'm not a librarian. I came to the BC library world by becoming a volunteer as one of the directors on our library board in Tumbler Ridge. And then I've just kind of grown into this position. So I came at it from a different angle. So I maybe see things that maybe a librarian wouldn't see, because they're so used to it. And for them, it's just normal. And for the normal person who's just outside of the library looking in, it's like, wow, you guys really go above and beyond.
Well, thank you very much for sharing all of your insight on it. It's really interesting to see your evolving role over time.
Harwinder.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the presenters. When we're talking about people at the library go above and beyond, having 3 children of my own and having to utilize those services, I can attest to that. Everybody does go above and beyond, and I've also noticed the roles that libraries played, my local library as well in Vernon, during COVID with online resources. And I have 2 kids, they go to French immersion, and I didn't learn French growing up. So the online resources that my kids can access and I can too in order to help them with their homework. Not only that, when I remember a few years ago when we were in Vernon Library, my mom were scrolling through the stuff, which I didn't realize. Her eyes just lit up and she came running to me so happy. I thought, what happened? She found Punjabi books. And she felt she belonged. First, she thought she happened to be with me and I'm going to do my stuff. And I didn't realize until then that how much difference it did make. And she grabbed some books and sat in the corner and then she ended up borrowing a couple books, that not realizing that in Canada there is something and that was available to her for all these years. So that's why I really appreciate the work you do. And during COVID, not only COVID, recent heat waves, what libraries done in many communities, including my own, providing that cooler shelter, safe place for people. And those are just few examples of the work and the plethora of services that you provide. And I just want to thank you to everyone working there. Kevin, you had mentioned that there were some cuts a few years ago. Can you let us know how, when was that and how much and how did it impact the services that, as I mentioned, heavily rely on? And what I shared is just a little bit of that, going above and beyond and providing services from little children to seniors and from diverse backgrounds. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The high watermark of provincial funding to public libraries in BC was $17 million. And we had that for 1 year, and it was fantastic. And then the subsequent year, that was reduced back to $14 million. And so when we were just looking at our own work and having conversations about, I wasn't working in this sector when those cuts were made. That's some time ago now. There's lots of great stories about the difference that additional $3 million made. And then what had to be cut back in the subsequent year. And so when we're doing our calculations of getting to $22 million, we're going from that high watermark. And, our conversations amongst the sector is, I think about it like this. When I listen to all these stories, at a core, all of these stories are about people, right? About people in communities. And I feel like, in my mind, libraries help feed people's emotional and intellectual hunger. We're kind of like warm soup on a cold afternoon. And much like soup, the investment that the province gets in terms of or the return the province gets in terms of the investment in public libraries is kind of like borscht. Borscht is really cheap, right? Borscht is cheap at half the price, I think is what that saying is. And so, part of our argument to the province is think of how much more of people's emotional and intellectual appetites we can help feed with what really is a tiny increase of investment when we look at the full scope of the provincial budget. So I hope that answers your question.
I can just speak to, I've been a librarian for 20 years, so I was around during those cuts, and I was head of a department at that time, so I can tell you that what we did that year and then had to continue doing was, in some cases, we stopped buying where we would have bought 2 or 3 books from a BC publisher that maybe wouldn't get a lot of attention, but we wanted to support them. We went down to 1. When before I could buy 500 Punjabi books, I could buy 100 because I had to start looking at the census and deciding, even though I know, having worked in Richmond and Victoria and in a variety of branches, how much that moment means when someone like your mom comes in and sees it. When the going gets tough, we start picking the things that will benefit the most people. So we have to make really tough decisions in those moments. And I think we've been doing those cuts every year since, because the money goes less and less far. So we cut the number of languages we're going to hold. we cut the number of programs that we might offer otherwise.
Thank you. Thank you both. And it's disheartening to hear that how it impacts people, and not only people, it's people who are already probably, racially marginalized, or who are trying to get the sense of belonging. And the things people, majority won't have idea how much difference does it make for them to see that they belong and they have some resources there that they can use. The reason I asked, I think now that you gave us that it was $17 million, then, and that's new ask, it'll really help us to understand as a committee, when we're considering your request. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, then I will wrap up this panel by thanking you for taking the time to work together to create a picture of the role that libraries play in our communities. And as you were speaking, I was thinking of my own community of Burnaby North, and I would say that for sure, the library is the heart of that community. It is a magnet. People go there. They do feel like they belong. And I must say, I don't think I ever go to that library without having a positive experience, without running into someone I know. And it's also, I'm struck by the fact that in my community, there are 107 different languages spoken. And so you can only imagine how important the community is, the library is, in terms of people feeling connected to each other and connected to the community. I guess it's the library that kind of civilizes us. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for your time. Bye-bye. We will recess until 3:20. And our next presenter is Kari Scott White, QP Local 391. Kari, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, committee and chair. As you say, my name is Kari Scott White. I am serving as president of QP Local 391. I also serve as one of 3 regional vice presidents for QPBC for the Metro region. And I am a library worker as well with the Vancouver Public Library in the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. And that's where I'm joining you from today. You've heard from some eloquent speakers and passionate advocates for public libraries on the previous panels. I'm also here to talk today about public libraries, the services that our members provide, and to amplify really the message regarding the need for an increase in what has been over a decade of stagnant funding from the province for public libraries. Libraries are democratic, libraries serve the underserved, libraries foster positive ways of interacting with the world from the time of childhood. And public library systems, as you've already heard, serve multiple provincial priority areas, including economic recovery, making life affordable, connectivity, poverty reduction, reconciliation, accessibility, and many other areas of really important social infrastructure. And our members deliver these services. We serve these priority areas through public programming, in person and digitally, by enabling access to free and democratic space, and through the promotion of open, respectful, and sometimes challenging dialogue about the pressing issues and ideas of today. These institutions of social infrastructure are highly utilized, and the workers, our members, are experts at filling these societal gaps. For many of our neighbors in the communities that we live in and we serve, libraries are not just nice to have. In fact, they're a vital connection to government assistance, to social networks, education, housing, and other fundamental supports. Citizens have a right to access these supports in order to participate fully in society. And library workers every day are providing the services to connect folks with those supports, particularly folks who are most impacted by widening gaps in today's social fabric, which we have seen highlighted and accentuated over this last year and a half. The pandemic has intensified and really brought to light inequities that we've talked about for a long time that are built into our current structures. And I'm hopeful the committee will recognize the needs here of our neighbors and communities. And I want to speak a moment or two as well in terms of how library workers themselves represent a workforce that bears historical inequities in terms of depressed wages. This is a workforce that is primarily made up of self-identifying folks who identify as women, over 70%. The gender inequities are additionally glaring when you look at what's happened over this past year in terms of layoffs, closures, slow reopenings for systems getting back up and running. It's a sector that relies heavily on precarious workers who work part-time or auxiliary and have reduced access to benefits such as sick pay. And as I've already mentioned before, there's an inherent gender bias in the wage structure. We see this in many of the compensation structures, and we're in a region that does not have pay equity legislation. So there's some additional challenges our workers face in terms of being adequately compensated. Public library systems have been chronically underfunded. Workers are doing more with less, particularly in the time of crisis, as you already heard. It really is a matter of equity for library workers and for the patrons that we serve. You have heard, of course, the ask from ABC PLD and BC Library Partners and others in terms of advocating for increased budget amount. QPBC is certainly on board with that ask. And that the increases be tied to inflation. It's really important that we see that continued investment in the service moving forward. so that we can continue to deliver these vital services and ensure that the workers who deliver them are supported in that work. And I welcome any questions and turn it back over to the chair and committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Kari. Any questions?
Thank you. Is it Kari or Carrie?
It is.
Kari. Kari. Hi, Kari. Would you mind sharing what is I have no idea what the entry-level wage is for library workers. Could you just bring a bit of context as far as, what the entry level is? And you also mentioned that library workers are expert at, I think you said, fulfilling societal gaps. And so I'm just wondering if you could also maybe just share what are the educational requirements of library workers?
Sure. So to the wage piece, it does vary, obviously, across the province, dependent on what region you're in. I'm most familiar with Vancouver because that is where I work and the members that I represent. And the city of Vancouver is a living wage employer in this last few years. So entry level is, I'd have to look up the precise amount, but around the $21.50. As an hourly wage, perhaps is reasonable. It is a living wage. About 50% of our workers are part-time or auxiliary. So on an hourly basis, a reasonable wage, no guarantee of any particular number of hours a week. And that's a challenge in many library systems. And stable funding contributes directly to the ability for library systems to invest in those full-time stable kinds of positions. So that's to the wage piece. And then I'm sorry, your other question was in terms of fulfilling societal gaps and education.
Yeah. You'd mentioned that they're experts, I think, at fulfilling societal gaps. So I was just wondering what the educational requirement is for library workers, and then also if maybe you could expand a bit on what specifically you're referencing when you're talking about the need to be, or I guess they're experts at fulfilling these societal gaps, and what you're actually referring to there.
Sure, and again, there's going to be a range, and depending on the system, smaller systems and larger systems will have differences. For librarians, it is a master's, so it's a significant investment in education to achieve a master's. There are paraprofessionals, such as myself. I'm a library technician. That's a diploma program, so it is post-secondary. And then there are sort of clerical frontline that don't have a requirement for post-secondary education, but certainly invest in a significant amount of other kinds of training. And related in terms of what kinds of gaps we're talking about, connecting newcomers with services, new immigrant services. We are talking about tax assistance in some cases, certainly accessing internet and digital resources, across the board. All of our workers are continuously learning and investing in that kind of education. Workforce technology skills development, depending on the system, there may well be programs that are specific about job finding or specific to editing, let's say. So really a wide range there.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for the service you provide.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Kari, thanks very much. Just in follow-up, you said you work in the Vancouver library system, and the Central Okanagan is a very different, because the municipalities got together years ago and they have the Okanagan Regional Library System, which is it's a system that's created from probably Sycamoose or Shuswap, all the way down to the border. And I guess I'm kind of wondering how much of the funding to run the library system in these individual areas? Because they're not all the same. And I know the Vancouver Library is obviously, a significant investment by the city of Vancouver, and I think the province and the feds must have helped contribute to the building. But when it comes to the operating, how significant is the monies that the province provides? Can you break that down?
Sure. So, I think some of those specifics around funding might be better directed, not at necessarily at the union, but at the boards and the directors. Yeah. But I'll do my best in terms of what I do know. The provincial funding has, on average, and this is not specific to Vancouver, but on average across the province, has reduced from the municipalities or districts made up approximately 80% of the funding, now make up 80% of the funding. And in the past, municipalities and districts provided approximately 72%. So the reduction in that provincial money, municipalities have had to take on where they can to make up for their gap. And as we know right now, municipalities are really struggling. There's less of flexibility in terms of where municipalities can, how and where they can access funding. So the provincial contribution is really, really important. It has reduced over the years, and that has had a direct impact on municipalities and the kinds of services and the level of workforce in systems.
Thanks very much.
Okay, I'm going to ask a quick question myself before we wrap it up. I just want to be clear in terms of, as you said, we've heard previously about the impact of the funding stagnating. And the impact it's had on the number of books that could be purchased. And I think you're saying that's also had an impact on the number of staff that could be hired. Has it had an impact? You mentioned pay equity. Has it had an impact on your pay?
I think that's a more challenging, that's a less direct answer, I think, because, wages are bargained. There's many factors that come into wages. As far as the equity piece is an additional layer. These have been depressed wages always. It's historical. Yes. And so, that's a complex one in terms of a direct reduction or stagnation.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, and not at all. But I think because it is so challenging and complex, we certainly would see that there is a correlation, between if funding is less and humans make up, the how services are delivered are through humans, and humans need to be compensated appropriately for the work that they do. And when that funding is not there, it either means wages are reduced or you have less people doing the same amount of work. And so, that's a piece I didn't speak to, but the stresses on our frontline workers, the impact on their mental health, on their physical health in terms of having to take on more and more work when there is reduced funding and less ability to provide hours and maintain the level of service. That also is really a direct impact from funding.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just thank you.
Oh, thank you. And we have some other people that we are going to make presentations. So thank you again for taking the time and talking about the importance of libraries from your perspective and the importance of the work that you do. Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay, so we will go to our next presenter, who is Peter Bezovsky, who is representing Comox Valley Lifelong Learning Center. So if you're there, Peter, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Peter Bezovsky, and I am the Executive Director of the Comox Valley Lifelong Learning Center. I'm speaking to you today from the traditional unceded territories of the Comox and Pentlatch peoples. And we're a community-based literacy organization that serves Comox, Cumberland, Courtenay, and the surrounding areas, including the Comox First Nations Reserve Lands and Denman Island. As a small organization, our funding is reliant on primarily provincial sources, and our core funding is formed by a grant from the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Training through the Community Adult Literacy Program. We rely on additional funds for literacy outreach coordination, which are provided through Dakota Literacy Solutions on behalf of the province of BC. The remainder of our $100,000 annual budget is drawn from donations and community fundraisers. To put it bluntly, we are a very small organization. 3 part-time staff and a dedicated pool of 50 to 70 volunteers provide an annual estimated 200 adults with one-to-one tutoring in reading, writing, and digital literacy. 150 youth and preteens are served by our after-school homework clubs, literacy workshops, and activities. And we reach almost 1,000 families in our area through community activities and events. As part of our goal of lowering barriers to learning, we embed our programming in public libraries, recovery houses, shelters, seniors' homes, outside food banks, and community drop-ins. Our referrals come from young parent programs, family services, and other such agencies that are working directly with people in the community. We deliver our services as closely as we can to where people need them and where people can most readily access them. I'm here today to make this committee aware of the need for services like ours, particularly focusing on adult literacy initiatives. Now, regrettably, because I am a literacy worker, I have no choice but to present this as the form of a narrative. And so I would encourage you to view this as story time. And let me explain to you a little bit about what we have been doing during the last year of our COVID pandemic. On March 17th, 2020, just like most organizations and businesses in the province of British Columbia, our agency was forced to close its doors. By March 21st, we had reopened as an internet cafe offering free computers, printing, scanning, and phone access to individuals who did not have these supports available to them. At the time, this initiative, it was presumed by the staff, would be about reaching people who were marginalized or precariously housed or sleeping outdoors. I'm pleased to say that we were able to serve 4,000 distinct individuals in a year basis of keeping that service open. We did everything from applications for CERB, employment insurance, Ministry of Social Development, property tax assessments, provided facilitation for people to speak to their physicians or family members on an ongoing basis. Our agency pivoted successfully and provided in-person support on a literacy level, which showed us, and hopefully shows you, a great need for services of this nature in our community. We are primarily reliant on provincial funds, and we're primarily reliant on our core funding through the CALP program. We ask that you please take this into consideration, recognize that literacy matters more than ever, and that without these supports, community organizations like ours would not be able to deliver the kind of activities we do to the numbers we reach. Finally, I have nothing to present to you in terms of documentation, but to be slightly cheeky, because I heard it so much over the last 12 months, I would encourage you to visit our website at www.cvllc.ca, and you can easily see all of our programming, view some videos of the kind of innovations we provided, and see the testament of our work. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Peter. Do we have any questions for Peter? Greg.
Peter, well, hats off to you and your staff and your organization. It sounds like an amazing organization you've put together, helping, as you mentioned, 4,000 individuals last year with a gross budget of only about $100,000. So that's definitely deserving of applaud. So thank you for all you're doing, and I'm certainly looking forward to checking out your website.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Peter. I don't know how you do it. I mean, you might as well be a part-time magician. I mean, it just you just make it happen. But I was struck when you listed off some of the agencies that you deal with, and recovery homes was one of the areas that was there. So I'm curious on two things. First, I assume that they're licensed or registered within the ALR to become a recovery home, and just what exactly is the service that you're providing to those folks in the recovery home?
Mm-hmm. So the services we provide primarily in the recovery houses, I should say services, involve a group that we provide once a week, which is called Writing Out Loud. So this is a way for the women who are in recovery. The house is called Amethyst House, and the Women's Recovery Service, as it is licensed. But that service is designed to allow those women to actually express some of the emotional things that they are going through as part of their recovery through the written word. So it's not that we ask them to write a journal. It could be as simple as an activity writing a shopping list and then discussing why you chose the items you did on the shopping list. It's an opportunity for people to use language and literacy, again, to explore themselves. And that's part of our encouragement. The other service we provide, obviously, is if we are offering one-to-one tutoring and someone at a recovery house does request it, that is the first place we will go to meet them. We won't require them to walk through the doors of an agency that says Learning Center on the front. It's obviously too much of a barrier for most people.
Thank you, Peter. The smile I have on my face is large, because I can only imagine that when you go inside of that recovery home, it just gives them some other tool to not be thinking about why they're there and helping her out in their journey to sobriety. Thank you.
And Pam.
Thank you so much. We have a similar organization in my community, but we don't have the same relationship that you have with these other service organizations. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about and how the trust factor and working together and privacy issues and all that goes with the clients that they serve? So can you just give me a little bit more information, because I'd love to take this back to my community.
Sure. So it became very obvious to us that having a separate office, and I am in an office, obviously, we have a brick and mortar building, but having that separate office as a space for us to engage with our community, and particularly with the learners we were interested in working with, was extremely complicated. And so as a result, we ended up in a situation where we tried as hard as possible to embed things outside. That took effort in terms of developing consent forms, in terms of reaching out and really informing, and then developing those relationships, not so much with the management. And I don't wish to, I am the executive director, I don't wish at all to be disparaging of management, but we weren't developing relationships with management. We ended up developing them with the frontline workers. Okay. We wanted to know who was doing the work, what kind of problems they saw, either in terms of people being unable to read tenancy agreements, unable to navigate social development forms, unable to understand how EI was navigated, or the language around EI. And we just identified those things, and we took the referrals directly from the frontline staff. So the relationships we've built are on that frontline level. I really encourage my staff as much as possible to do all of their relationship buildings and all of their outreach with frontline staff, no matter if at a drop-in, mental health and substance use, any of the services that we have. So that I would say is the first step.
Okay, thank you so much. Lots to think about.
Yes.
I see no other questions, comments. So on behalf of the committee, Peter, I'd really like to thank you for the work that you do, your vision of community organizing, and you referred to your presentation as storytelling time, and you told us a pretty amazing story. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And we'll move to our next presenter, who is Carolyn Gowlitz, Grand Forks and District Public Library. Carolyn Gowlitz. Are you there?
Hi, yes, I am here.
Great.
Should I start?
Yes, you should start.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me to present to you today. So I'm Carolyn Gowlitz. You were very close on my name. I'm the library director for the Grand Forks and District Public Library. And I'm here today to bring your attention again to the importance of sustained provincial support for public libraries. Last year and the year before, I wrote letters to this committee on this topic, and both years the committee has included a recommendation on increasing funding to public libraries. Since then, unfortunately, nothing has changed. BC public libraries are still underfunded. And despite being subject to significant restrictions and regulations put in place by the provincial government, libraries have not seen sustainable financial support at the provincial level. I know that COVID-19 is going to have long-reaching financial consequences for the provincial government, but any more budget cuts and freezes should not be taking place in the library sector. I mean, you already know that public libraries are incredible resources for their communities. In rural libraries, public libraries are often one of the only places to go and to be inside without buying anything, to access the internet, to meet and interact with others, and to find educational and entertainment opportunities. The service population for my library is about 9,000 people. And in a normal year, we see about 70,000 in-person visits. We lend 80,000 items, and we have about 6,000 participants in our free programs. Other public services just don't see anywhere near this much use, and yet libraries are the ones who are facing frozen funding. In 2009, public library funding in BC was decreased by 25%, and it's been frozen at $14 million ever since then. That's 12 years of frozen funding. Until this year, libraries have been under the Ministry of Education, which has seen regular increases. And why have public libraries not been included in these increases to the Ministry of Education? So we're now in the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Are we going to be lost in the shuffle again here? Over the last 12 years since funding was frozen, minimum wage has doubled, and our library's labor costs have increased by 45%. Labor is our most significant expense, taking up about 60% of our total operating budget. And with frozen provincial funding, the shortfall here has been made up by cutting our budget for buying books, begging our municipality for larger increases, and this year, laying someone off. Rural libraries are all facing serious budgetary concerns as we have to stretch our provincial funding further and further each year. Some of the smallest libraries rely on the province for the bulk of their funding, and so they haven't seen any meaningful budget increases at all for over a decade. Meanwhile, the public is demanding more and more new and exciting services from us that they hear about from larger urban libraries, which we can't even begin to replicate. Recording studios, makerspaces, virtual reality, 3D printing, robotics. These are largely services we can't even hope to offer, but they're being delivered regularly in urban libraries. And those libraries are able to hire countless staff with diverse skills. They're able to renovate their spaces, but rural libraries are struggling to stay open 3 to 5 days a week for a few hours on each of those days. And their directors are taking on more and more responsibilities. I have taken on bookkeeping, building repairs, advanced IT services. These are not things that I learned when I took my Master's of Library Science. And lots of BC public libraries, in fact, I would say most rural BC public libraries, don't have even one professional librarian on staff because they cannot afford to hire one. They might not even have a library technician on staff, so they have 0 professionally trained library staff. And so I'm recommending 2 things for 2022. Firstly, that public library funding is increased with planned inflationary increases in the following years. And secondly, I'm recommending that there be a significant funding differential for rural libraries. It's currently impossible for rural libraries to offer service equitable to that in urban libraries, and it's unfair to continue to download library funding onto small municipalities if the provincial government is going to continue to heavily regulate the public library sector. Public libraries support so many goals our government has right now, making life more affordable, advancing human rights, supporting economic recovery, et cetera, et cetera. And politicians love to talk about how much they love us, which is great, but it just doesn't pay the bills. So thank you for your time. Ooh, look at that, 2 seconds.
Thank you, Carolyn. Is Carolyn, you go by Carolyn?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. Questions from the committee? It's
Great. You know what? I just want to make a comment, Carrie Lynn. That was a great presentation. Thanks very much for putting it out there so succinct and in an animated manner. And I know your community, and I know the challenges that local government has had with the flooding, and I mean, it just goes on and on. So fortunately, I don't think you have a forest fire that I'm aware of. But anyways, maybe it's the Incomeep one that's close by. But anyways, thanks very much. And anyways, we'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I think Ben speaks for all of us. So thank you for your time, and yes, thank you for your animated presentation and your passion. You made it very real. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye. So our next presenter is Rom Van Stoke, British Columbia Yachts Broker Association. So Rom, whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Okay, so I'm presenting on behalf of the British Columbia Yacht Brokers Association. To give you some quick background on myself, I've been in the marine industry since 1984. I'm the owner of Custom Yacht Sales in Cedar Grove Marina, and I'm also a partner in Island Sea Farms. We're the largest growers of mussels in the province of BC. And I give you that just because I'm kind of acutely aware of the changes in our environment with ocean acidification, trying to grow aquaculture in the province, working with First Nations, also being in the recreational boat business and owning a marina and dealing with all of that. So I would like to talk to you today about the 10% luxury tax that is in the budget, or coming in the budget of the proposed by the Liberals for 2022. As a agent for the province to collect tax, yacht brokers have been collecting the PST portion, the 7% on new boats. And new boats represent a large part of the sales and a huge amount of revenue that is going to come to a crashing halt. And I think as soon as this tax is implemented, this tax was historically, this luxury tax was put on boats in the United States in 1990. And there was an expectation of a $31 million net revenue. Instead, there was a $8 million tax revenue loss. The tax has also been tried in Norway, Italy, and New Zealand, and it was failed experiments, and every time it was tried. What we're seeing in our industry is new boat sale orders canceled. I just got off the phone with Wes, who is West Bay Yacht Builders in Delta. He recently had a $6.2 million new boat contract, 72 feet, would have employed 20 individuals for a year and a half, canceled. Why? Because of the implementation of this new boat luxury tax. This tax is unfair. It targets individuals in BC. I ask any one of you to explain to me how it's going to affect somebody in Alberta or Saskatchewan or Manitoba. And even in Ontario, where they have boats, they don't have the high expensive boats that we see here on the coast. They don't have the thousands of miles of coastline that these small communities rely on tourism and people coming in boats. And why should somebody who chooses a boat, a new boat, be targeted or penalized? What we're finding is that there is no appetite for that additional 10% luxury tax. People just refuse to pay it. So what will happen is the province will lose the revenue it presently collects on that, the PST portion. The government will lose its GST portion, but you will be the biggest losers. There are other ways to gain revenue. Provincially, this province should look at a permitting system. It exists already in the state of Washington. That would be a kind of a user pay system that would help with the derelict vessels that are scattered along our coast. It could go, there's much better ways than, stopping an industry that, struggles, as it is, so we've enjoyed some success. People are spending their money now here because of COVID, but that will all go away. Another, example of a local boat dealer, each one of the boats that he sells, he sells a boat for $3 or $4 million. $500,000 is spent after the fact on installations. And those are all jobs, local jobs here on the island and, in the lower mainland, where systems are installed on that boat, on those boats, right? And then there's a constant upkeep and maintenance. So the province really needs to be aware, acutely aware of the fact that it is going to lose there's going to be a negative impact for jobs, firstly, and we're going to see that right away because people will be laid off from these businesses, no question. We've seen it in the past. There's going to be cancel orders, and there already are on boats because people are afraid to have to pay this an additional tax starting in 2022, January 2022. That's when it's proposed to come in. And you're going to see a huge loss of revenue to the treasury of the province of BC. So I'm going to conclude at that. I see my time's running out. I thank you very much for listening to me this afternoon. Have a good afternoon. Goodbye. That's it, I guess.
Did you want to take questions?
I'd absolutely love to take some questions.
I think I see one question.
Sure.
Megan. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm good. But thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting.
Yes. Okay, no questions. I guess you were pretty straightforward, pretty clear. Oh,
well,
there is one question. There's one question.
Okay.
So, Ram, you mentioned that there's a federal Liberal proposed tax, and of course, you know that this committee we don't control that. But I understand the impact on the provincial treasury. So, that's your point, is it?
Yeah. So it definitely will affect the. There's no other tangible item in the province of BC that has the value that boats do that you guys can collect tax on and is sold and resold. So even though this is on new boats only, every new boat becomes a used boat. And I have sold many boats that started off new over and over again. And each time I'm collecting 7% on behalf of the province. So that's going to stop. When this tax was implemented, so if there's any way for you to reach out and explain to the feds that this is going to negatively impact the treasury of BC. Why BC? Why pick on BC? How is it going to affect Alberta's treasury? How is it going to affect these other provinces? It's not. It's going to negatively impact the province of BC. And that's what I'm here today to tell you. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing that with us. We'll take that into consideration.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, thanks and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, our next presenter is Robert Germain, BC Association of Broadcasters. Robert Germain, we're ready for you.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Sorry. Good afternoon, committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Rob Germain. I'm General Manager of Czech Media Group, but I'm speaking to you in my other role as President of the British Columbia Association of Broadcasters. There are more than 115 private radio and television broadcasters in BC, directly employing nearly 2,000 British Columbians. As broadcasters, we have never before appeared at this committee, but the last 18 months have proven to be extraordinary for our province and our industry. COVID-19, changes in the retail environment, and the rapid growth in digital advertising alternatives threaten broadcasters' future in this province. Communities in every corner of BC are well served by private radio and television stations. In addition, Indigenous peoples and ethnic communities can rely on local broadcasters conveying news and information relevant to them and often in their own languages. From local news and pandemic health briefings to wildfire evacuation advisories and Amber Alerts, BC broadcasters perform a vital service. But all of this is at risk as many stations now struggle to survive. We believe the province of British Columbia can play a pivotal role in protecting local voices and local content by offering broadcasters the same financial incentives as it offers others in the creative industry. A labor tax credit for employees delivering news and information would act as a lifeline for this important industry. Before I get into more details on the challenges we face in our proposed solution, let me offer you a bit more background on the broadcasting industry in BC. Private radio and television, conventional stations play a vital role providing a trusted source of news and community information. Nowhere is that more evident than during the COVID-19 pandemic, with many of our members broadcasting live updates from Dr. Bonnie Henry and countering through news reports the misinformation frequently spread on social media. And during the devastating wildfire season, local broadcasters have been at the forefront informing communities of our latest dangers and evacuations. Our efforts are immediate, they're factual, and essential. Our members are often the hub of communities and are critical to the rebound in our economy. They provide a critical service in large cities and small towns, and they are especially vital for ethnic communities. In a multicultural province like British Columbia, where 30% of the population immigrated from another country, ethnic radio and television stations act as a cultural lifeline, broadcasting in Punjabi, Mandarin, Cantonese, and a host of other languages. If one of these broadcasters is displaced, an entire ethnic community will be affected. BC broadcasters still enjoy strong viewership and listenership, but the COVID crisis has dramatically reduced the advertising revenue models. This has been exacerbated by inequitable taxation and regulation of online media giants. Google, Facebook, and YouTube are eating up a larger share of advertising budgets, and yet they don't pay the same taxes, and they don't employ British Columbians, and they won't be sponsoring your child's sports team. We believe there is a solution. A labor tax credit for the creation of Made in BC content can help stations survive, keep local economies strong, and preserve these important community voices. This would be similar to the economic incentives already offered to BC's film and video industries, but which currently exclude news and public affairs from eligibility. We have an analysis estimating the value of this at $18 million a year, but that's not a bailout or a gift. Just as with movie production, it is an incentive to broadcasters who keep British Columbia's content creators employed in the long term. It's about protecting jobs, enhancing the creation of news and information, and strengthening geographic and ethnic communities. In conclusion, as a result of the challenges I have mentioned, a leading media economics firm is predicting the closure of dozens of Canadian radio and television stations over the next 2 years. But it doesn't have to be that way. Given the value of local broadcasting to our democracy, our economy, and the cultural fabric of this province, we believe a labor tax credit merits consideration. Those jobs and the diversity of editorial voices strengthen our communities. If they are lost now, they will be lost forever. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rob. Do we have any questions from the committee?
Thank you very much, Rob. I guess I have a couple of questions. You mentioned a number of times tax credits, and I think you referred to film and television. Can the TV stations existing not access those credits now?
Directly, for the most part, no. And specifically with regards to news production and public affairs, they are excluded. I assume because of the fact that for the most part, for broadcasters, it's a condition of license to produce those types of programs. That worked when it was profitable to be in broadcasting, but many of our radio stations and television stations are losing money. And even before COVID, we're losing money. And so it's no longer sustainable to be producing that type of programming without some sort of assistance.
Okay. Madam Chair, a second question. As a layperson to this, I mean, I've had some experience in the print business. Is this not all federally regulated? How does the province have skin in this game?
Well, yes, broadcasters are federally regulated and licensed, and those licenses, by the way, mean that broadcasters are Canadian-owned, that they have to abide by codes of conduct, that they have to provide fair coverage in their news programming. They're accountable. So those are all important things. Other media are not regulated in the same way, but we do not receive federal wage tax credits. The federal tax credit for journalism goes to daily newspapers and to some qualifying digital organizations, but broadcasters are specifically excluded.
Broadcasters are excluded from those federal programs completely?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rob.
Do we have other questions? Ben? Oh.
No, I'm good.
Mike?
Thank you for your presentation, Rob. I'm acutely aware of what happened when the pandemic first hit. With all the restaurants and businesses simply closed, there was no reason for them to do any kind of advertising, which all of that industry relies heavily on for that. But you made a comment that if we don't save them now, they'll be lost then. What kind of a time frame are we looking like? Are we at the skin, at the point in where you're just hanging on? And that this is a lifeline to kind of let it go for a little while, or is this perpetual?
It's not just COVID. It is a trend in the industry where across Canada, 70% of conventional television stations are in a losing money position. 50% of the radio stations in this province, even before COVID, were losing money. So it is the CAB, the national organization similar to the BCAB, has predicted there will be dozens of stations closing in the next 2 years.
Yeah, thank you.
Ben?
Rob, thanks very much for that. Okay, so what's changed? I mean, you touched on the fact that you social media, but I mean, can you be more specific? I mean, I'm just not really certain. I know that people are certainly very active on social media, but when it comes to trusted news sources and stories and stuff like that, I mean, I take social media with a grain of salt. So I'm just kind of wondering what is changing and what can the industry do to, besides finding a subsidy system or something like that, what's the long-term solution to make it so it can stand on its own 2 feet?
That broadcasters can stand on their own 2 feet?
Yep.
Well, broadcasting industry is built on the advertising model. Now, there are, and that is a crucial fact here, is that it is free. What broadcasters produce is free over the air, and that includes television. All you need is an antenna to receive over the air, or in fact, many stations like Czech, we today just launched our Czech Plus over the top service, which is available without a subscription. So it's free. It's not behind a paywall. You don't need a subscription, but we're providing trusted news and information. As I say, that is, we have whole codes of conduct. We, apply to standards and to the Canadian Broadcast Regulatory Authority. But all that will be lost if broadcasters can't sustain the programming that they're doing. And all we're looking for is similar to what BC has its own Made in BC film and video credit, in addition to the federal tax credits that are available. And we've seen what a difference that makes in British Columbia, creating Hollywood North in Vancouver, and even here on Vancouver Island, film production that is very robust because of those tax credits. They're incentives. It's not a subsidy, it's not a bailout. And I think that it makes sense that broadcasters, which are performing a democratic service, right now we're in the middle of a federal election, those broadcasters that are providing that public good also receive the same types of benefits that you're providing to foreign filmmakers that are coming to BC.
So, Madam Chair, just to follow on, is there any other jurisdictions in Canada providing what you're asking for? Does it exist elsewhere?
Well, as I say, there's a federal labor tax credit that is that where broadcasters are exempt from. To my knowledge, I don't know of any other provincial body that is providing labor tax credits for broadcast news and information production. BC would be the first, but BC was again ahead of the curve in the film subsidies and film incentives, and it's paid dividends.
Thanks, Rob.
We have one more question from Greg, and then I think we'll need to move on to our next presenter.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. More of a comment. I certainly appreciate the services that your organizations provide to British Columbia. What you're asking for is really about retention. Government is great, and it's been very successful, obviously, with the film tax credits and trying to attract business and industry to British Columbia. But in the instance of your guys' industry sector, it is shrinking, and you're losing jobs left, right, and center. And so I think what you've asked for is definitely reasonable, and I certainly would encourage government to give strong consideration to what you're asking for. Failing to provide any of those necessary supports, we'll just continue to see job losses. And, I can see 5-10 years from now, people looking back and thinking, with a little bit of dollars or a little bit of funding, we could have actually helped to protect this very important industry that provides, the important fact-based information that we all rely on. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Yes, even if stations don't close, you're right, the cutting back of jobs, hollowing out, using network programming where they used to have local voices and local information. We're already seeing the erosion there, even if before stations are closing.
So with that, Rob, we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much for bringing this to our attention. Speaking for myself, I think I did know that that the broadcasting industry was, the news industry was facing challenges. You've certainly made it clear just how serious a crisis it is, and you've proposed a concrete solution. So thank you for that. And we will, I think we'll have more conversations about it as a committee in terms of what we can do to support you. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And we'll go to our next presenter, who is Carolyn Tuckwell, BGCBC. Are you there, Carolyn?
Here I am. Thank you for having me. Thanks for the opportunity to present today about Boys and Girls Clubs here in British Columbia and the exciting year ahead. I'll just jump right in. A little bit of background. Boys and Girls Clubs across BC provide vital programs and services to nearly 48,000 children, youth, and families in 101 locations across the province each year. For over 80 years, clubs in British Columbia have opened their doors to children, youth, and families in small towns, large cities, and across rural communities. If a young person needs it, our clubs aim to provide it during their out-of-school hours. And clubs provide early years, school-age programs at all purpose-built facilities within schools and in many community locations based on the community needs across this province. High-quality early learning and childcare and before and after school programs for both children and youth are at the foundation of Boys and Girls Clubs work. Clubs support those who are at greatest risk. We focus in neighborhoods where we know families are more likely to struggle, and especially those in vulnerable communities, Indigenous and racialized children, newcomer youth, children with disabilities, and low-income families. A strong childcare program strengthens the accessibility of high-quality programs. It drives down the cost for families that need it most, and it improves staff recruitment and retention, supports parents and caregivers, especially women, to get back to work, which, of course, we all know is more important than ever. And Boys and Girls Clubs are here to deliver those kinds of programs in support of families, while we also provide the most enriching possible programs and opportunities for kids during their out-of-school hours. The recreational category within childcare is brand new. I expect that maybe some of you are not even necessarily all that familiar with it. And here in particular in Boys and Girls Clubs of South Coast BC, we are incredibly excited about this new development because, in fact, this new model of recreational care within the community care facilities, legislation, and regulations is really capturing the model that we have offered here to more than 3,000 children, youth, and families each year across the Lower Mainland. So as we recognize that childcare is critically important in the lives of kids and families, we know that the early years and high quality childcare is critically important for kids up until they enter school. And we also know that parents continue to need support, high quality support for programs after the school dismissal bell rings. So clubs welcome this new opportunity to provide a recreational care model that really is something that we've perfected here in Boys and Girls Clubs of South Coast BC over the vast many years. We've worked closely with licensing within the Ministry of Health on the establishment of this new category and are looking forward to moving through the licensing process, which is now underway. This category really is reflective of offering families choice that meet their needs on a highly flexible basis while also ensuring high quality levels of both programs, but also oversight. And the really what we're able to bring to life through this model is a drop-in model that allows families to access the programs as they're needed. The reason that I'm here today is to talk about the opportunity to work with the province around a pilot of funding for this new model. We're ready and able to continue this model within South Coast BC and are anxious to work on a pilot of funding in order to support the extension of this model through other Boys and Girls Clubs across the province. And then we anticipate also it being highly applicable to other youth-serving organizations who are interested in bringing this model to life as well. So that's my presentation. It really is a proposal to work with you around a potential funding model that would be a pilot for future use.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Do we have any questions from the committee to get some?
Hi, Carolyn. Thank you, Chair. First off, I support the Boys and Girls Club. I was supposed to be in a water fight against the RCMP last week with our local Boys and Girls Club in Williams Lake. It was canceled, unfortunately, due to COVID, but I know we'll get them next year. Can you tell me a little bit more about the pilot project? What does that look like?
Yes, so here in South Coast BC, we have actually been working with this model for many years. And as I said, working with licensing and the Ministry of Health to create the new category to really have this model be something that is accessible to other organizations to offer. So the model itself is a drop-in model for children between 6 and 18. So really from grades 1 through 12. And highly flexible, self-directed programming that is developmentally appropriate and allows children access to opportunities based on their choice around how they spend their time during their out-of-school hours, with a focus in particular of after the school bell rings at the end of the day. It isn't a before-school program. We really recognize that the government of British Columbia is already investing really in major ways in this age group of children between the ages of 6 and 18. And so we appreciate that where childcare already exists as an option for families, this is the addition of a new model that is more flexible and on a drop-in basis. So we appreciate that a pilot that we would welcome the opportunity to work on and develop with the government could right-size the investment available for children to access this in the right dosage and for the right intensity and duration over their school career, so that in their out of school time, they have a place at their local club to engage with, and perhaps also, depending on opportunities in community, access other available options. So it's not a one size fits all model. And we appreciate that attaching a dollar value to it is going to be complex, and we are up for that challenge. In our model, we have self-funded our programs for all of the years, and we appreciate that being in an urban center has allowed us to do that. But we really understand that there's a lot of complexity going into this as the government potentially considers funding this model as another option within the childcare categories that now are regulated. Does that give you a picture of the proposal? It's not incredibly detailed yet because we appreciate the complexity around potentially attaching dollars to something that is not like a childcare funding, an existing childcare funding subsidy.
Yeah, definitely helps, and I will definitely do what I can to support your program. It's they've done incredible work throughout the province, but I've seen it for certain in Williams Lake, and it's an incredible program. So, thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Greg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Carolyn, for your presentation. Do you have any numbers on what the approximate cost is per hour of care, or I guess, or supervision that you provide for children currently? Is it $5 an hour? Is it $10 an hour? Is it $2 an hour? Do you have any idea of the magnitude of the actual cost per hour that children are under in one of your programs?
Off the top of my head, I don't have an hourly rate, but what I am able to tell you definitively from our experience is that the average cost of supporting a child to participate in our model for a year is $1,200. And that is then we work backwards. Children attend a variety of periods of time over the course of a week and then over the course of the year. And so it is in our experience, it is an affordable option to deliver these programs and services. I would be happy to do those numbers and provide a follow-up for you to give you that kind of information, if that would be useful.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. And then I guess the other question I have, you've referenced this pilot. Have you established a dollar figure to what it might be to actually provide and undertake this pilot project?
So the pilot that I'm referring to is really a proposal around a pilot around funding not around the program. So the program is something that's been in operation in our organization for many years, again, under the watchful eye of the ministry as we worked with them to develop this new model of care. But we have, in South Coast BC, always funded this ourselves. So we haven't proposed a dollar value because we're conscious of the fact that a drop-in model is one that would need a different type of funding model than, for example, a traditional childcare funding arrangement between either a family and the ministry around a subsidy or an organization around its funding of the regulated childcare program.
Okay, so there's not a specific dollar ask. It's just you're asking for the opportunity to work with government to try and flesh out and establish what a program may be. Okay, great. Thank you very much, and looking forward to receiving that additional information.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Carolyn. I personally really like the Boys and Girls Club program, and I, have many friends and family members who benefited, and personally too, raising my daughters by myself for years, I knew that there was a backup when I needed. I know that you also provide transportation to kids, which not many childcare centers or the other programs do provide. In your the pilot program, would that be included? Because I know transportation is already challenging for many parents, and whether it's the personal mode of transportation or even the cuts to these school buses as well, because I think that's the key and it's very crucial. So I'm just curious if that will be included for the families who cannot afford to have transportation. Sorry. Thank you.
That's a great question, and you're quite right. Transportation is a critical issue, and each Boys and Girls Club organization across the province has its own arrangements in place. And I do think that that is part of the complexity that we'd want to work through in order to come to an arrangement that would make sense. For clubs that are in areas where children are within walking distance, oftentimes the arrangement is a walking school bus where staff are at the school when the school bell rings and walk the children safely back to the club, whether it's a couple of blocks or maybe a little bit longer. So that certainly is an economical way that we address that. We do also, most organizations do have vehicles that we operate to transport children. And in my experience, typically that is included in whatever the fee is for the program. So it is always our intention to go to the extent of inclusion and accessibility, which we appreciate is including transportation. And we know that in some rural areas that may in fact increase. So I believe that typically is a core part of most Boys and Girls Clubs offering and what we would look at.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I do know that staff at Boys and Girls Club, they do go above and beyond. And in my community, they do have vehicles. And I think that's the challenge I hear from most parents, and usually single parent. They would be at work until whatever, either it's a shift work or longer shifts, and they want to access this service, but who will pick their child up and drop it? And that's been very, very helpful. However, the staff manages, it's been I've received very positive feedback that, that puts away that one barrier in for parents to accessing this exceptional service. So that's why I asked. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I appreciate the question so much, because I think that as we've seen this, this new category established, we're excited because it does in fact introduce a new kind of option and new choice for families that's highly flexible and accessible, and proven across the communities that we're in. The opportunity to work on a funding pilot also dramatically increases the opportunity for us to expand dramatically what we're doing out of the organizations that we're already operating. And we're really excited about that because of the things you've just spoken about. We know we can do more for so many more families.
Absolutely. Thank you. You are making a difference, and everybody working there. Just so you know, there's so much positive feedback out there. It means a lot to a lot of families. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I think that is a a wonderful note on which to end this particular presentation. Carolyn, we've had a long day of presentations, and we still have one more. But at this point, to actually have this kind of discussion about such an important way, we have been so fixated on establishing a childcare system, and this is such an important part of that in terms of families that need occasional help, and so we really look forward to finding a way to integrate what you're talking about. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time and attention. It's been an honor to speak today.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And our final presenter today is Shelley Frost from the Pacific National Exhibition, the PNE.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to hear from the PNE today as you consider the pillars of your upcoming provincial budget. First, I want to offer our team's heartfelt thanks to the BC government for the financial support given to major anchor attractions like the PNE earlier this summer, and for the support of fairs, festivals, and events that was announced last week. These are really important foundations for our industry as we build back from the pandemic. Now, just a few reminders about who we are here at the PNE. We are a 111-year-old nonprofit that operates 365 days a year. We run the annual PNE Fair, Playland Amusement Park, and we host over 1,000 event days a year in music, festivals, sport, culture, trade, film, and community events. Leading up to 2020, we were financially stable and investing in the future. In fact, we had 3 of our best financial years on record just prior to COVID. We directly employ 4,300 staff, with 97% of those being unionized. We are the largest employer of youth in the province, and we provide very important low barrier to entry jobs for people with disabilities and from diverse communities, as well as highly skilled trades. In a normal operating year, we generate between $55 and $60 million a year in revenue. We invest millions back into the community, and our events are responsible for providing a $200 million economic impact to the region. We draw guests from all corners of the province, and over 75% of our PNE guests annually come from outside Vancouver. So what are we asking you for today? I'm going to get straight to the ask. As you develop this unique post-COVID budget, we ask for your support in 4 key areas to ensure that COVID recovery momentum is not lost. First, to ensure the long-term financial recovery of the music and arts and culture industry, the PNE is proud to be building on the success of Creative BC's Amplify BC strategy by building critical infrastructure to support the recovery and sustainability of BC's music, arts, and culture industries. This past June, Vancouver City Council approved the PNE to invest $65 million to redevelop a world-class outdoor amphitheater right here at the PNE. And that step was solidly supported by industry leaders, performers, and promoters from across the province. The PNE is requesting a contribution of $25 million shared between the province and the federal governments, with the PNE and the city investing the remaining $40 million. Several MPs have already indicated strong federal support for this project. We just need to now bring the province to the table for discussions as well. This new amphitheater is critical. It fills a huge venue gap in the Lower Mainland. It increases access to arts, culture, and will significantly increase musical performances while also supporting the PNE's long-term financial recovery. And as part of this infrastructure, we're also investing in renewable energy that will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 520 tons a year through the addition of solar energy and electrification in this new venue. Our second point today is that in order to ensure the long-term financial recovery from COVID, the PNE requests the continuation of the funding mechanisms that have already been put in place by tourism in 2021, the Major Anchor Attractions Program, and the Fairs, Festivals, and Events Recovery Fund. We ask that those be made available in a tapering manner, even in a tapering manner, for 2022 and 2023. These are incredible operational lifelines for both ourselves and our peers as we build back to normal operations, but we're not there yet. Third, for the first time, the PNE is requesting consideration from the Ministry of Agriculture to support our role as a provincial leader in ag education. Through participatory programming like Kids Discovery Farm, the Journey of BC Food Exhibit, our farm country displays, or the largest 4-H festival in BC, We bring urban guests and rural producers together like nowhere else. The P&E Fair has had its revenues reduced by $45 million over the past 2 years since COVID hit. And without support from a ministry like Ag, we'll be unable to continue investing the millions we do in these non-revenue generating Ag programs until we're back on our feet. We really need Ag support to help fill this gap for the next couple of years. And lastly, the P&E requests access to provincial funding streams that we've not had access to in the past, or that there's been barriers for our participation that we'd like to see removed. First is the Tourism Events Program, the TEP funding, from which we've never been granted funding in the past, although we generate 180,000 tourism visits every year, and we're responsible for 1.7 million in hotel night spending every year. And we'd also like to request access to the community gaming grants from which we've been excluded. This program has a series of criteria that are just built for a traditional nonprofit, and we just don't fit that mold. So specifically there, we're just asking for flexibility in those criteria. Now, how can the P&E support the province back? We generate over 600 million social media impressions annually. And I think as we've all seen in the last year, mainstream media is eager to tell our stories loudly and often. We'd be thrilled to use those tools to support your government's investment in the P&E and all the good we do. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Shelley. Pam, did I see your hand go up?
Thank you so much. Can you tell me what the capacity of the world-class amphitheater is going to be, please?
Yeah, the maximum capacity will be 10,000, but we're building it out in a way that it will be scalable for performances of all sizes. So it will be able to accommodate smaller capacities of 1,500 and anything up to 10,000.
And will there be...
And that's what...
Sorry.
That's what we've heard from promoters, is that's the sweet spot that they need.
So you need some flexibility. Is there retractable roofing at all?
So the roofing may not necessarily be retractable, but it will definitely still feel like an outdoor venue, but it will have roofing covered to extend our season so that it can be used for 12 months of the year.
Okay, thank you so much.
Megan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation, Shelley. I know 4-H spent many years at the P&E, and all the fantastic programming and opportunities that you put on for the youth as a leader, and know that each year 4-H youth look forward to the programming that's offered there and the opportunity to come together and stay. I know this year's been a bit different, as was last year. Now, does the Ag support that you're looking for, can you expand a bit on that? And does that include, how are you seeing that, including like the 4-H programming, then all the other programming that goes on in the other weeks? Like, what's sort of your vision with that Ag support?
Yes, thanks for asking. So the 4-H Festival is a big component. It's the first 4 days of the fair, but it's about a $250,000 investment on behalf of the P&E. Then there are a number of other programs that we put on that run the full 17 days. And those would be things like the Journey of BC Food. That would be our farm country displays. That would be our interactive kids discovery farm that takes 25,000 kids through each year. Or our demonstrative cooking displays with local producers. So all of those programs, the 4-H Festival is about 250,000, and all of those other programs combined are about another 450,000.
Okay, thank you so much.
Any other questions? Lauren.
Thank you, Chair. Just clarity around the numbers that you introduced. If I caught it right, you were looking for a $25 million commitment from the province, and that would be split with the federal government, and then $40 million from the cities.
So the venue itself will be a $65 million investment, and we're asking for $25 million to be split between the province and the feds. And then the P&E and the city will come together and pay the remaining $40 million.
Thank you very much.
We originally anticipated paying all 65, but COVID has hit us hard, just like everybody else. And in order to make this venue a reality for long-term COVID recovery and music industry strength, it's really important that we get this venue up and running.
Lauren.
Just to follow up to that, you added one more little bit of question for me. Is the city committed to it yet?
Yes, it was approved at City Council in June of 2021, so just a couple of months ago.
Great. Thank you.
So there, yeah.
Ben.
Thank you, Shelley. Just to get a bit of an order of magnitude on these other, besides the 25 million split, which we don't know whether that's 50-50, what type of support are you looking for from the Minister of Agriculture to run the programs you talked about? And you talked about the tourism program and community grants. What's the numbers that you have? What's percolating away in your financial service division's mindset?
Thanks. So when we talk about the two programs that were administered by tourism this year, the major anchor attractions, that was up to $1 million for major anchor attractions. And then they also announced support for fairs, festivals, and events, and that maxes out at $250,000. So those two pieces, if they could continue that program for the next couple of years to help both us and all of our industry colleagues get through coming out of the COVID, that would be fantastic. Our agricultural investment, as we just spoke about, is $800,000. There's other parts that we will continue to be able to invest in, but we are asking the Ministry of Ag for $800,000. The other two programs that we spoke of, which are the community gaming grants and TEP funding, each of those programs has a maximum of $250,000.
Any other questions? Okay, well then I'll wrap it up by thanking you for making such a clear and high energy presentation. You know, the PNE is my neighbor.
I love that.
And my grandson is working there right now in Playland.
Oh, good. And I'm so thrilled to hear that.
And most of the family, you know, has worked there at some point in their life.
I think that's one of my favorite things.
It's a big part of our community.
I think that's one of my favorite things is everybody has a connection to us. Yes. And it is a fair day. I look out my window and I see everything happening. So I'm sure I'll see your grandson out there somewhere.
Probably. I won't tell you exactly where. He'll kill me.
Thank you. I appreciate very much your time today.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Okay, thank you. See you tomorrow.